of the University of Yaoundé in Cameroon. He has a Master of Arts degree in History and Archaeology from the University of Bamenda, a Bachelor of Arts degree in Political History and History of International Relations from the University of Marua, and a Higher Teacher's Training Diploma. He has been working as a high school teacher for history and civic education for over 6 years with the Ministry of Secondary Education. He has also served as a volunteer with the African Organization for Education. Eugene has actively participated in a number of national and international workshops and conferences. He's the author of 9 scholarly articles that have been published in different international journals. His research interest is focused on gender history, political history, social history, and the history of international relations. Amazing. So after this session, everyone who is here will receive a certification test, and that is only 8 questions. And if you get 4 out of 8 or over, we will send you a certificate. And just a disclaimer that this meeting will be recorded, so if you wouldn't like your face or voice to be in the video, please keep your microphones and cameras off. And before we begin, we would like to take this time to acknowledge the traditional lands in which we operate, which are the unceded territory of the Mohawk, a place that has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst nations. And for me, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm on the traditional and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Eugene to begin today's workshop. Hopefully you're able to share your screen, Eugene. And Yasmin, would you be able to make Eugene host?
Yes, for sure.
I'm still unable to share.
Yep, we're just making you host 1 second.
Okay.
All right, you should be able to share now.
Yeah.
Okay. Just a minute or 2. Please, I'm sorry, I need just a minute.
No worries.
Okay. I'm having some difficulties. I don't know if you can help me share what you have.
I do have the presentation. Would you like me to share instead?
Yes, there's no problem with that.
All right, and you can just let me know when to switch the slide. 1 second.
All right, I think we can start. Can I move on?
Are you able to see my screen?
No.
Okay, 1 second. Are you able to see it now?
Yes, we can see right now.
Yes. All right. So are we good to go?
Yep. 1 second. Let me just mute myself.
All right.
You can go ahead.
All right. I wish to thank you for giving me the opportunity to proceed with this presentation, which is going to focus on an introduction to the peer review and editing process, which is going to be presented by my humble self, Eugene Munto. So basically, this presentation has as agenda, we are going to begin by defining some key concepts, and from there, we are going to move into look at tips for editing your own work, which will be followed by tips for editing someone else's work. And we are also going to proceed from there to look at how to write concisely, which will be followed by how to conduct a peer review. And from there now, we are going to have a brief summary of this workshop. So basically, this presentation has three main objectives. And the first objective here is to help you grasp the concept of peer review. And the second objective of this presentation is to help you understand appropriate procedures in the peer review process. And lastly, it is also intended to help prepare you for engaging in the process of peer review. So now we are going to move straight to have some key definitions, which are going to guide us all through this presentation. And to begin with, we are going to start by defining peer review. And peer review can be defined as the evaluation of a scientific manuscript by one or more people with similar competencies not involved in the study. So what we should retain from this definition is that the person who actually conducts a peer review is not involved in the study that has been carried out. And from this definition, we are now going to look at peer reviewers. Who are peer reviewers? And here, peer reviewers can be defined as fellow researchers and colleagues of the author who are familiar with the domain of the manuscript being reviewed, but not necessarily authorities on the subject. So one thing you should also take note here in this definition is that the only person who has authority over a research endeavor is actually the author. And now, having said that, we are going to look at the next definition, which is editing. And editing means making suggestions, comments, compliments, and changes to writing. And on the other hand, editors are those who plan, revise, and coordinate material for publications in maybe journals, magazines, and websites. So having had these four key definitions, which is going to guide us all through this presentation, I know some of you might be asking the question, what is the difference between a peer review and editing? And what you should note is that a person who actually conducts a peer review should have similar competencies with the author and be familiar with the content of that manuscript. Meanwhile, an editor actually has a fewer role to conduct as far as the manuscript is concerned, because he only has to check maybe grammatical errors and make sure that the writing is in standard, maybe of the journal that you are trying to publish with or so. Now, having said that, we are going to move to the next part of this presentation, which is going to focus on how to edit your own work. And most often we note that each and every one of us would like to write in a way that will realize a high quality paper, but most often this often seems to be a very difficult task. And in order to realize a high quality paper, it is imperative, or it is also important, to take note of some of these key things that we are going to look at in this presentation. And first of them is you have to take your time to read backwards. What do we mean by this? It implies that when you write, you have to start from the end of your paragraph, you read in reverse order. This is because most of the times our eyes tend to see what the brain expects. So reading in reverse order, please, we're having some technical electrical problems, so just bear with me with the image for now. I believe that will be looked into. So what I'm trying to say is that when you read backwards, it enables you to actually see and identify some of these spelling errors that are found in your manuscript. And having said this, the next thing that is very important for you to note while editing your own work is to make sure that you read out loud. And what you should note is that your mind may move too fast when you are reading silently. But when you read aloud, this permits you to take note of grammatical errors and maybe poor use of tenses, which might be silent and seem right. So reading out loud actually permits you to identify where certain things are not right. Now, the next thing that is very important is to try to work from a printed copy, that is a hard copy of your work. This will enable you to actually take note of where there are certain things that are not right. And you should also be able to place your finger and try to follow each line of your manuscript carefully to make sure that you identify what is not working out for you. So this is very important to take note when you are editing your own work. Now, the next thing that you should take into consideration is to make sure you have someone else edit your work. This is because most at times when there are errors that it might seem very right to you, but when you have someone else edit your work, it helps you because they will actually identify some of these things that seem right to you, which are actually wrong. So having someone to edit your work is very important, and you should always give gratitude when you have such people who can take time to edit your work. Now, what you should also take into consideration is that you have to take a break from writing when you finish writing. After you write, you need at least some few days to enable your brain to at least switch gears from the writing mode to the editing mode. This will enable you to actually identify certain things that you couldn't identify when you were busy writing your manuscript. So now it is important for you to note that you need at least 2 rounds of editing. And here, the first round of editing that you need is for the higher concerns. And the second round of editing is for the lower concerns. When we talk about the higher concerns here, what we are actually referring to is some of those things that are actually missing when you're writing. So the lower concerns here actually comes to talk about maybe grammatical error, punctuation, and spelling, some of these minor things. So if you don't take time to actually find out what is missing in your work, you will spend more time trying to correct those few things like spelling and grammatical errors because you did not actually take time to figure out the higher concerns. Now, no matter what you write, you should always make sure that you have a great opening sentence. Having a great opening sentence makes your work very interesting for readers. So in order to have more readers read your work, it's always good to make sure that your first sentence is actually very captivating. So this will help your readers to also have interest in your paper. Now, we all make mistakes. It is very important to learn from your mistakes. We all make mistakes, but we realize that there are some mistakes that are more glaring than others. So you should also make sure that you take time to identify some of these mistakes and take care of them. So having said all that, now we are going to move to the second major part of this presentation, which is going to focus on how to edit someone else's work. And here, there are also certain things that you should note when you are trying to edit, or you have the task to edit someone else's work. The first thing here, you should remember that it's not your work. And your job as an editor is not to tell someone how you would have written their own work. Your job is just to help them write what they intend to write. So try to do this without being too concerned about certain things that doesn't concern your expertise as an editor. Now, you should also try to find out from the author what they actually need, because there are some authors who actually doesn't really need editing, but they just need reassurance for what they are actually writing. And there are others who actually need moral support. So finding out what the author actually wants is very important, because you might just take someone's work and start editing, meanwhile, and editing things that might not really be what the author really needed. So always make sure that you first of all find out what the author actually needs. Now, let's look at the next thing that you have to take into consideration when you trying to edit someone else's work. And the next thing that you are going to notice that you will not be doing a favor to anyone by trying to being too nice. So your job here is to help the author realize a high quality paper. So it is very important here to resist the temptation of making someone feel that his or her manuscript is actually very excellent. Meanwhile, it's not. But however, in some cases, we have people who are just writing, who seek editors just to have motivation and encouragement to make sure that they are actually writing the right thing. So in such cases, this might not really apply. And now, you should also try to avoid being a source of discouragement to the author. When you are trying to edit someone else's work, you have to be gentle and polite. Try to make suggestions and don't just give orders. And you also have to ask questions and avoid assumptions. This is very important to take note of. And now, it is very important to also note that pointing out problem areas is far more helpful than offering solutions. And actually, we will note that while editing, it is inevitable that you may be struck by ideas how someone else's work would be better. But you have to note that it is very okay for you to actually offer some illustrative directions that the writer could actually take. But ultimately, the writer is the best equipped to come up with ideas for directions for his or her manuscript. So your job as an editor here is just to spot out what is actually not working out not working out in the paper that you're actually trying to review, to edit. Now, it is very important to also figure out why certain things might not seem right to you. So there are times when maybe while you are editing someone else's work, certain things might really not sound good. So you should find out why is this not working out for me? Because you might be the one that actually have a problem. So always try to find out why something isn't working out. And it is very important to remember that even though you are editing someone else's work, there are things that may actually seem right to you, but which appears wrong to the writer. Or there are things that may appear right to the writer, which might actually be wrong to you. So here, you should always remember that, as we always say, personal taste is personal. So we are going to move to the next part of this presentation, which is focused on how to revise writing to be more concise. And here, the few things that we are going to take note of are, you have to make sure that you take this into consideration, these few points that we are going to look at, because nobody actually likes reading a long-winded text. And it's hard for readers to concentrate on your message when you're writing your message, when they have to slog through your message with unnecessary sentences and, when they have to go through your message with long unnecessary sentences. So avoid long sentences and never use 10 words where just 5 will do. Because most at times, students in particular, they might just try to write in order to catch up with the number of pages that are required. But you would, in trying to repeat sentences, you actually make your work boring for the readers. And it is very important to also check unnecessary phrases that are actually in your sentence without adding value. And now, moving to the last of this on this section, as much as possible, it is always important to avoid tautologies. And here, by tautologies, this refers to phrases that repeat the same information in your manuscript. So, from having said all this, we are now going to move to one of the key segments of this presentation, which is focused on how to conduct a peer review. I think this is a very important section of this presentation. And what you should note before starting a review report is that it is helpful to consider the role of a referee. And to this respect, some researchers have actually suggested that for you to carry out a peer review, you need to consider the role of a referee. And here, you have to take note that the referee has two roles to play, which is being that of a journal advocate and being an author advocate. And here, by a journal advocate, here is concerned about the significance and quality and even the internal logic of the research manuscript. And we are going to realize that most referees actually understand this role. And however, many referees, they ignore their role as author advocate, and this most at times causes many problems between the reviewers and maybe the authors. So now, being an author advocate, on the other hand, implies that you take a sympathetic, engaged, and even humble attitude in reviewing the work of others. And here, it also means setting aside one's prejudices to make sure that one's not imposing one's views on an author. And furthermore, it is also important to choose one's word carefully. It is also important to choose one's word carefully and avoid unnecessary, harsh, and dismissive statements. So it is also worthwhile noting that a referee's responsibilities are limited, and a referee can only provide insight into aspects of a paper which the referee has expertise. So consequently, referees do not need to worry if there are aspects of the paper that are beyond their skills. Now, we are going to have a brief summary of this presentation. And what we should retain so far is that peer review minimizes last-minute drafting and may cut down on common lower writing errors. And what you should also note, which is very important, is that peer review allows writers to clarify their own ideas as others evaluate their work. At least when you have someone evaluate your ideas, this helps to actually clarify your thoughts about a particular issue. And now, next thing we should note is that peer review encourages self-reflexibility and fosters critical thinking skills in an author or a writer. And here, peer review help writers to learn to question their own work, values, and engagements. So it was a very brief presentation, and I wish to thank each and every one of you for being part of this presentation.
All right, thank you so much, Eugene, for the great presentation. Also, thank you to everyone who attended. We really hope you learned something from this workshop today that you can apply to your own research. Again, we'll be emailing all attendees shortly with a certification test and other follow-up information. Remember that the test is optional, but we encourage everyone to do it. Don't forget to register for our next and final workshop happening next Saturday, May 8th on the publication process. Registration links will be included in the email that we send out after this. And one final announcement, all of you in this workshop will be hearing this first, but the research team at Lives for Literacy applications will be open on Monday, May 3rd. So application forms will be sent to all registrants who indicated interest in joining the team on Monday. But if you haven't and are still interested, feel free to send Lives for Literacy an email to let us know. And so as a part of our research team, you'll be able to use the skills you've learned from these training workshops and participate in peer reviewing articles, editing manuscripts, and conducting your own research for Lives for Literacy's various publications. And you don't need any research experience to apply, so make sure to tell everyone you know we're looking for the most dedicated applicants. Okay, so again, thank you so much, Eugene, and thank you, everyone. That's it from me. Yasmin, do you have anything to say?
No, not much, but thank you all for attending today's session, and we hope to see you next week.
All right, thank you so much.
All right, bye.
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 Sophia, there's a comment that says, how can we connect with our speaker? Presenter, how can they connect with him?
I can include his email in the email we're sending all of you afterwards.
Perfect. You're welcome. I've taken you guys' names down, so you're free to go. But if you have any questions, please let us know.